Hello again, it's me, Uncle Dennis. We're continuing the story now about John Sampson hacking. As I left, he was still in England. The family continued to live in England for approximately the next 10 years until he was about 14. And then the family was able to accomplish their great desire, and that was to travel west to Utah with the Mormons. James Jr., the oldest son in the family, at that time he was about 21 years old, he's the one, they say, got the money together to pay for the family's passage to cross the ocean. The family sailed from England, and then they sailed across the ocean. We often think that the people, I got a little map here in case you can see it, we often think that the people leaving England and that they would sail over into the New York area. But our family, the hacking family, traveled a little bit different way. They sailed from England down around the tip of Florida, and they came into the New Orleans area in Louisiana. And when they landed there in Louisiana, the family's money was basically gone. And the family had a very hard time trying to get enough work. So James Jr., the oldest son, he took his wife, he was married then, and he took John Sampson, his younger brother, about 14, and their two sisters, and they went up the Mississippi River by steamship to St. Louis. And there the two boys were able to get jobs in the coal pits. Now, these two boys learned a secret while they were working there. Every day when they worked in the coal, digging out the coal, at the end of the day they would take a little bit longer time and dig out underneath the shelf of coal. And during the night the coal would settle ever so slightly, so that in the morning when they came to start breaking out the main seam of coal, it was much easier for them to break it out. And in this way these two young men could load more coal out than three grown men during the course of the day. They'd been up there about 5 weeks, and then they received word from their mother, by letter from their mother, I guess, and she said that the family in New Orleans was in a destitute situation and was near to starvation. So James took his young brother, John Sampson. They went down to the docks. There he made an arrangement with the ship captain that John Sampson would work on the ship in order to pay for his passage down to New Orleans. And he gave him some money in order for him to go down and give to the mother. As the boat was leaving the docks of St. Louis, they didn't know it, but the family, the first steamship they passed, the family was on that steamship. John's mother was able to get some money from her brother, Thomas Pearson, in order to pay for the family's passage up the Mississippi, and so they could be together again. Unfortunately, the little baby of the family died at this time, and he died mainly due to malnutrition and illness associated with not having enough to eat. So this is one of the people in our family that died on this way to Utah. James continued on down the river, and he worked on the ship, and he noticed that the first-class passengers and that had a lot of food to eat, and the cooks would just throw a lot of the extra food that was left over overboard. So he made an arrangement with the cook of the kitchen that if he could hide the food, put it into a bucket, cover it with a blanket, he would then carry it down to the poor people that were down in the bottom of the ship that were in those areas. And this he did for those people's benefit, and they greatly appreciated it. He also learned another trick, that fresh eggs was a premium on board the steamship. So when the ship would stop at the various docks to load cargo, unload cargo, take on passengers, John Sampson would go on shore and he would purchase some eggs, and then during the trip down the river he then would sell these eggs to the passengers at a marked up price. He did this all the way down the river, and he had made some money by the time he got to New Orleans. When he got to New Orleans, he found out that the family had left, and so he spent some time there with some friends they knew in the area, and then he made arrangements with the ship captain, the same one that he went down the river with, to sail back up the river. And he did that, working his way up the river again buying and selling eggs, so that when he arrived in St. Louis he was able to give his mother $12 that he had earned in selling these eggs. which was greatly appreciated by her, and it was a big help to the family. It took the family about a year and a half to earn enough money to buy an outfit of wagons and oxen and whatever else was necessary to supply them in order to make the trip from St. Louis to Utah. And so they came west in 1851. I think they came with the Carton Company. And when there's not too much told about their journey west. A lot of the pioneer journals and letters and things like this don't really say too much often about the trip west, because it mostly was a long, boring trip. They just spent many days walking and riding in the dust and just trying to get by until they made that long, arduous journey from St. Louis or Independence, Missouri, wherever they were coming from, until they made it out to the west, until they made it out in Utah. When they came to Utah, the family first went to American Fork, which they lived only briefly, and then they went out and settled in Cedar Fort. Now, if I remember my sister Laura's itinerary, we are to travel down to Cedar Fort, Utah today, and this is where John Sampson Hacking basically established himself, and it became the first home. Now, Mr. Fisher, that had married John Sampson's mother, he passed away shortly after arriving in Utah, and I think he was the first person buried in the American Fork area. I think I'll have another break now, and then I'll talk about John Sampson's teenage years. So again, this time now for another little pause. So we can take a pause now, or we can continue. We'll see you in a moment.